Today we have invited an eminent personality to address the audience on strategic futures of an emerging world order.
Now, I'd like to invite Deputy Conference Secretary Senuri Himasha to introduce the keynote speaker to the audience.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is my utmost honor and pleasure to introduce such a distinguished personality to this conference. I'm extremely glad about you being here among our undergraduates of Strategic Studies and International Relations, and appreciate that you could make the time for being here. Now, let me introduce our esteemed keynote speaker. Ms. Lalita Kapur is Australia's Deputy High Commissioner to Sri Lanka. She is a career diplomat with extensive experience working across the Australian government's foreign, trade, and development portfolios. Her previous roles in Canberra include Director of the Indo-Pacific Strategy and Geo-Economic Section, a secondment to the Office of National Intelligence as a Senior East Asia Analyst, and Director of the Sri Lanka and Maldives Section. She also has experience as a negotiator of Australia's free trade agreements with the European Union, Indonesia, and India. Ms. Kapur previously served abroad in Brazil and speaks Portuguese and Spanish. She has a Master of Public Policy from the University of Oxford and a Bachelor of Arts and a Bachelor of Commerce from the University of New South Wales, Australia. We are truly fortunate to have Ms. Kapur to share her insights and experiences with us today. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to the Australian Deputy High Commissioner, Ms. Lalita Kapur. Now I cordially invite Ms. Lalita Kapur, accompanied by Dr. Harendra Vidanage, Director of International Relations Office and Center for Strategic Assessment.
Good morning, Ayubawam, Vanakam, Salam Alaikum. I'd like to first acknowledge the distinguished guests here today, the Chief Guest, Major General Melinda Pires, the Chancellor of the KDU, senior KDU academic staff, KDU students, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honour to be invited here today to give the keynote speech, and I particularly appreciate the warm welcome you have given me, both through your words and through the beautiful dance we saw earlier. This is only the second time that I have visited the KDU, and I hope to have many more interactions with this institution in my years posted here in Sri Lanka. It is also particularly pleasing to see how the KDU Faculty of Defence and Strategic Studies is promoting such a vibrant intellectual environment. I hope this continues. I first visited Sri Lanka in early 2010. The country I saw then and the country I see now are, of course, very different at first glance, although I would say that certain structural features remain unchanged. But likewise it is with the strategic environment we currently contend with. The world looked very different 13 years ago. Today I have been asked to speak on the topic of an emerging world order, which is the subject of your research. It's a topic I know that the students here have been engaging deeply with, and it's one that I personally find very interesting. So today I'll be providing you with an Australian perspective. I will do that first by outlining how Australia perceives of the global context and current geopolitical shifts. I will then describe how we see our near region, the Indo-Pacific, where the great majority of Australia's trade and people-to-people links reside, and where our future prosperity and security lies. And within this region, we have a particular interest in Sri Lanka's neighbourhood, the Indian Ocean. But given the audience today, I would also like to share with you my personal experience and views on foreign policy and foreign policy strategy. The students here today represent Sri Lanka's future, and you will be shaping the country's approach and policy for many years to come, whether that's internally within government, within defence institutions, or externally outside of government as members of the non-government sector, part of the business community, the media, and other members of the community. It is also an opportune moment at this point for Sri Lanka to reflect on its history and also its future, and to recalibrate and recast how you see your place in the world. So first, let me move to the global context. Post-pandemic, while in many ways the lived experience for much of the world's population has started to improve with the return to the free flow of goods, services and people, at the same time the world is confronting serious challenges. The three most significant being shifting geopolitics marked by heightened strategic competition, climate change, and thirdly, an uneven economic recovery characterised by supply shocks from Russia's invasion of Ukraine and a gradual retreat in some domains from globalisation. So on geopolitical shifts, which is what I'll focus on today, and what we might be tempted to describe as the emerging world order, I'll go through a few of the points that we see as being most salient. The first of all, of course, is the strategic competition playing out in the region, centred on the world's two largest powers, China and the US. It's a commonly held view that intensifying competition constrains the freedom and action of small countries. And I've often heard it said in Sri Lanka that when these two elephants fight, Sri Lanka is the grass that gets trampled. But I feel this overlooks that many smaller and medium-sized players, such as Australia and Sri Lanka, can and indeed have much to lose if we do not play a role in how our region and our world is shaped. So for a middle power like Australia, we place great importance on preserving the character of the global order we inhabit and operate in. More specifically, that is the rules and norms that underpin our security and prosperity, that ensure our access and influence within an open and inclusive region, and that lessen the risk of competition veering into conflict. Instead, we seek to preserve an open and inclusive world order based on multilaterally agreed rules and international law, where countries of all sizes have the freedom to make their own choices. Openness means access to the regional commons, including its waters and airspace, consistent with international law. And the international rules governing trade should also be transparent and fair. We also want stability and peace, one that is underpinned by a balance that deters aggression and coercion, and a balance to which many players, including Australia, and we hope Sri Lanka, will be contributing to if it is to be a durable peace. So this balance that in Australian foreign policy circles has been articulated quite well, I think, by our Foreign Minister, is one where we look at both deterrence, so steps that we take to enhance our deterrence, and these steps should complement rather than undercut our other equally important efforts to strengthen strategic reassurance. And this is also important to note that we need our major powers to have reliable and open channels of communication to minimise the risk of miscalculation. And the third component of this view we have for world order is prosperity, connectivity. We seek a world where countries of any size can increase their trade and economic connections with the drivers of global growth through a system of transparent rules and relationships. This is a place where open and predictable markets serve as a safety net, and economic independence is not misused for political or strategic ends. It is our belief that very few countries would want to live in a closed, hierarchical world where the rules are dictated by a single major power to suit its own interests. I'll turn now to our own Indo-Pacific region. So in our region, Australia's region and Sri Lanka's, the broader Indo-Pacific region, it is true that strategic contest is particularly apparent and in some instances more dangerous and more volatile. We are seeing a significant military build-up by China, the speed of which is putting the region off balance. We have also seen in recent years more instances of unsafe and aggressive behaviour, such as the militarisation of disputed features in the South China Sea and some dangerous encounters at sea and in the air. We have also seen new forms of aggression through cyber attacks and disinformation. And lastly, but certainly not least, the growing impacts of climate change and food insecurity on populations and livelihoods across the region. There are several flashpoints across our region, from the Taiwan Strait to the Himalayas, where miscalculation or accident could lead all too easily to conflict. The risk of conflict is no longer as remote as it once was, but it would be catastrophic if it occurred. And that is why our diplomacy can have no higher objective than preventing competition from veering into conflict. So what approach should we, as small and medium-sized countries, take against this backdrop? What should our foreign policy look like? Australia's approach to this is to work collectively by engaging bilaterally and through regional and multilateral groupings. In this way, we seek to ensure our interests are not ignored by the major powers. Regional bodies are of particular importance in attaining this balance. For instance, ASEAN in the Southeast Asian region ensures that that region's small and medium-sized countries, not the major powers, always occupy the chair of international diplomatic forums such as the East Asia Summit. Similarly, in the Pacific Islands, you have the Pacific Island Forum, which allows small Pacific states to set their own agenda and also determines how the rest of the world will engage with that region. For our region here in the Indian Ocean, of course you have the Indian Ocean Rim Association, which I'll touch on further in a minute. But we also recognise that to exercise influence in this more contested environment, it requires more of us as nation states. So Australia has embarked on a journey, I would say, in learning how to invest more broadly in all elements of national power. Hard power is an element of this, and it underpins Australia's contribution to strategic balance in our region. A few months ago, we released our Defence Strategic Review, which sets the agenda for reform of our defence posture and structure. And for those of you who are interested, I recommend you read it. The Defence Strategic Review, I can mention, does fit within a broader foreign policy strategy, and these are different components of our national power, and they all work together. Closer to home, I'll now turn to the Indian Ocean region. So this is a region, it is your region for Sri Lanka, that is growing in economic and strategic salience, and will only increase in importance in the years ahead. South Asia, alongside East and Southeast Asia, is already an economic centre of gravity. But unlike Southeast Asia, where ASEAN's centrality is already firmly established and recognised by external partners, South Asia and the Indian Ocean countries are in the process of strengthening their regional architecture through IORA. So the IORA outlook on the Indo-Pacific marked the first time that as a region, a common view of the Indo-Pacific was articulated. This is a view built on the rules-based order with respect for key international rules like freedom of navigation and overflight. It was an example of the important role that South Asian countries can play in shaping the norms of our region and strengthening the regional architecture. We are so pleased to see that Sri Lanka will be taking on the role of the IORA chair from October this year. And Australia looks forward to working with Sri Lanka and supporting its chairmanship over the coming 2 years. This region's leadership is crucial to the future of our broader Indo-Pacific region and the future of our world. As Australia's Deputy Prime Minister and Defence Minister, Richard Marles, has said, from our point of view, Australia's geography makes us a steward of the Indian Ocean. Australia has one of the region's longest Indian Ocean coastlines, and we are responsible for its largest maritime search and rescue zone. Like Sri Lanka, Australia has an interest in ensuring that shipping lanes that cross the Indian Ocean, on which we and the rest of the world rely, stay free, secure, and unimpeded. And looking beyond trade, the Indian Ocean is also one of the key points of confluence for global strategic competition, as Sri Lanka knows only too well. And it is also an area where the impacts of global warming and other environmental challenges will be felt significantly. So Australia is deepening its engagement in the Indian Ocean in several ways. We will be hosting the Indian Ocean Conference in 2024, which is the first time we're going to be doing that in the forum's history. In May this year, Australia opened a High Commission in the Maldives, which will help us deepen our relationship with an important Indian Ocean partner. And with India, we have done several things, including on the trade side, we've a new economic cooperation and trade agreement that was agreed recently and came into force last year, and we continue to negotiate on a more comprehensive free trade agreement with India. And India, I should note, is not only our bilateral partner, but also our Quad partner. And as part of that grouping, like us, they are committed to an open, stable, prosperous Indian Ocean region where sovereignty is respected. But as for Sri Lanka itself, I will leave it to the students to elaborate on Sri Lankan foreign policy and Sri Lankan interests. But suffice to say that Australia's interest here is both broad and deep. Our relationship is strong, in fact, very strong. It covers defence, maritime security, and border management to counter people smuggling. In a very significant way, we have very strong education links, as many of you would know. We have strong people-to-people links with most people I meet in Sri Lanka have either a relative or a friend who is studying in Australia or has lived there for many years. Our tourists come here in large numbers. There's also the potential to grow our business and investment links substantially. And I should mention that our development assistance in Sri Lanka has been significant and long-running, and particularly through the crisis, we stepped up to provide more assistance where we could. So I'll say finally, having looked at the global, regional and local context, that there are a few words more to say about the formulation of one's national foreign policy strategy. And I'd also like to offer a few observations about Sri Lanka's current situation, if I could beg your indulgence. So immediately prior to taking up my current role here as Australia's Deputy High Commissioner to Sri Lanka, I used to run a section in our Ministry of Foreign Affairs headquarters that had carriage of Australia's foreign policy strategy. So from all across government, whether it was the Department of Defence, the Prime Minister's Department, or even internally within our own Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, we would be asked to ensure how can new policies align with our broader foreign policy strategy. This enabled us as a government to produce more coherent, consistent and well-aligned policies across many domains. And it also helped us as civil servants understand what we were all working towards and how we each had a distinct role to play. We also sought to communicate our foreign policy approach to our external partners, the wider region, and as well as internally to our own population, to business groups and the wider community. In recent years, many countries have similarly developed their own foreign policy strategies, most commonly cast as Indo-Pacific strategies. And this has been done in order to realign their national policies to fit the modern geopolitical realities that they operate within. And I understand that in Sri Lanka, similar work such as this is underway. And I commend Sri Lanka on its intent to do this. So in the same vein, to modernise your foreign policy approach and to articulate the values and interests that you have in the region and the wider world. So we look forward to engaging with you. I hope it is an inclusive and a comprehensive process that delivers this foreign policy strategy. But we look forward to engaging with Sri Lanka as it finds its own voice and develops its own uniquely Sri Lankan perspective and strategic approach. So much as it may seem a daunting task, it is in fact an exciting time to be making Sri Lanka's foreign policy fit for purpose for the current set of strategic circumstances. Given the economic and political crisis of the previous year, Sri Lanka has experienced firsthand how much goodwill it enjoys around the world, including from Australia. And as now Sri Lanka seeks to conceive of and implement new reforms to rebuild and to recast itself, including through a vision for its foreign policy, it can rely on the continued goodwill, cooperation and friendship of Australia. Thank you.